episode 7 of the bodybuilding podcast or educational series, or me just telling you what I know, whatever you want to call it. Today we're doing a roundup, wrap-up feature to the episodes to this point. So we've grabbed questions again that have come off of Instagram, off of YouTube, from all the episodes to this point. We're going to answer those today, kind of get to a wrap-up, and then we're going to go on to the next episode next week, which will be peaking strategies, which is going to be it's going to be a good one. Mm-hmm. That is what I've kind of, not what I'm known for, but my consistency with peaking people is something I get complimented on often, and I'm just going to give you guys what I do, which is not very complicated. I simplify the method and try to get one variable dialed in at a time, rather than just picking and choosing variables, changing multiple things at once. And I think that's where things usually go off. So we're going to jump into that next week or next episode. But we want to get these questions answered first to kind of wrap up everything that we've done to this point. And we'll jump into them now.
I think the question, losing 3 to 4 pounds after a refeed, was misunderstood. An example of what I believe was being asked: sometimes during prep, I'll get a full day refeed, additional carbs at the same source, maybe a burger as well, and the next morning wake up full and tight, but I've lost roughly 3 pounds compared to the morning before starting the refeed. Okay,
so this question, I guess I misunderstood. There could be so many reasons why you drop weight after a refeed. I think sometimes, now again, if you are, let's say, chronically over-dieted and then you get fed, it could just be a release of stress from your body, and then your body is now, instead of holding on to calories, it's realizing that it's being fed and dropped. I think sometimes a lot of that comes down to stress. Also, another factor to consider is when you're starving, you might consume or you might consistently consume more fluids, which obviously the more fluids you consume, you're going to flush them. But what I've seen as well is if you give somebody a refeed, more often than not, they tend to drink less. So one thing that's super important is that you keep your water consistent, whether it's a low day or a high day. Now, if it's a high day and you keep your water consistent and it's consistently high, the carbohydrates are going to basically push and shuttle the water is going to push the carbohydrates into the muscle. So you're going to get a glycogen effect from that, but then there's also going to be more water in the muscle. So that, in essence, should make your weight go up versus going down. I would say very, very rarely, with all variables accounted for and considered, do my guys drop. But 100%, if they do drop, sometimes it does happen. It's rare, but they do. I will, without even questioning anything, feed them again. Because we want to ride the benefits and that wave of whatever situational environment caused their body to drop. And I'm not going to question that. I'm just going to refeed them again. But I would say a lot of that is more so due to stress hormone, whether that's you telling yourself, oh my gosh, I'm finally getting fed, or you no longer telling yourself, oh my gosh, I'm starving. The satisfaction of that food and just the mental release of that can cause your weight to drop, whether it be from cortisol, stress, whatever that is. So I would say more often than not, that's what it's from, unless you are in a super chronically over-dieted environment, and then there's more that's going to go into that. So sorry, guys, I apologize for missing that the first time around.
What should I do to recover from a show faster and not hold water for a week?
Okay, great question. The most important thing that you should do post-show is not feed your eyeballs, not feed all the saved posts that you've made for the past 12 weeks about which food you're going to consume after the show. When my athletes listen to me, and I'm not saying that my athletes don't listen to me, but when they truly listen, what I would really advise you to do is enjoy one meal after the show, but enjoy it conservatively. The biggest thing that I like my athletes to do is, from the second they step off stage, I ask of them and I request of them to try to get in at least 3 liters of water before they have any food. The reason why I do that is because when you're depleted of water and you cut your water, you've reduced your water, your hunger cues are going to be much higher because you don't have any water volume in your body. So replacing that first, getting yourself hydrated again, then the satiety is going to start setting in just from hydration, and you're not going to need to fill it with this massive volume of food. So that's super important. So when you get off stage, start hydrating immediately. Again, based off of the time, if you have an earlier show, like some of these shows nowadays are basically ending around noon, especially overseas in the UK, things of that nature. I tell them to get in, anywhere from 5 to 7 liters of water between that point and bed. Now, granted, in the US, if a show ends at 9, 10 o'clock at night, I'm still going to push their water threshold as much as they can realistically within that shorter window. So I'll say 2 to 3 liters, but requirement for sure, mandatory, is getting water in before food. Enjoy time. Like what I think is most important after a show is obviously, yes, like we're all human. Go enjoy something that you've missed out, that you've not eaten, or not eaten in the amount or quantity, again, realistically, conservatively, in a long time. But more so than that, give back to the people that came, that supported you, for the first time probably in a long time. You're not like head focused in on a goal. Hopefully you had a good result, because then you're also not overthinking a poor result, or you're not consumed with now a poor result. But just go and shut your brain off, stay off your phone, stay off social media, give back to the people around you, continue to hydrate even through that meal. Now, again, the first thing I encourage is water. If you want to enjoy like a Coke or a Diet Coke, a Coke Zero, whatever you want, that's also fine at this time. I would try to limit the sweets to something that's reasonable. And then the next morning, I know a lot of people enjoy breakfast. If you want that breakfast meal to be that one meal for the day that you enjoy, great. What I like to have my athletes do is resume their diet of, let's say, Tuesday or Wednesday going into peak week, the morning after the show, and then enjoying one meal with their loved one, significant other, family, again, later on in the day. Because if you think about it, so if you end the day before with a really dense meal, which again is fine, but then you start your next morning with a dense meal again, and typically breakfast, especially an American breakfast, is a lot of sugar, a lot of carbs, a lot of fats. So then you're really starting to that's when that like spillover effect is going to start to occur with the overconsumption of calories in that short window, in addition to the water that I'm hoping that you've consumed. So what I like to do is kind of clean up the free meal the night before, the celebration meal after the show, clean that up through the day, enjoy one more meal, that night. But again, be conservative, because what's going to happen here is when you pull water back and then you reintroduce water, those cells are going to volumize, all right? So what I really like to have is get your body rehydrated for that next full week. Resume your base diet or slightly above what your base diet was that you ended the prep on before you started any peaking process. Resume that, and then by the next weekend, your water balance is going to be back intact. You're not going to be watery. And then at that point, that's when you can really go in and enjoy food, and it's not going to have this super negative cosmetic effect. It's also not going to spike your blood pressure like it would have the week previous, because again, you have so many variables that you've just manipulated. You've been depleted, you've added food in, you've manipulated water, you've potentially used diuretics. There's so many things that are going on right after a show or right during a show that if you just delay that instant gratification just 1 week, that's all I'm saying, 1 week for most people, you can consume so much more food the following weekend without the negative return than what you could consume that's going to give you a ton of negatives right off the bat coming out of the show.
Burger the night before prejudging or after prejudging?
Neither. So really, guys, and this is something that I really started to grasp in the last few years. What is it about a burger and fries that people enjoy so much about the peaking process? Is it, as I mentioned in the first question, is it the mental satiety of just truly getting a taste that you've not had in a long time if you've not had a prep, burgers during prep? Is it the density of the food? Sometimes you're looking for a dense amount of food with less volume. In that environment, I agree with it. If it's just like, regardless of how the person looks, we're 4 weeks out, I'm going to coach this person. I know their last meal before they go to bed, I'm going to give them a half a diazide. I'm going to give them a burger and fries. I don't agree with that approach at all. It should be very situational. And if and when used, you should have a reason and a merit for using it. when you look at a burger and fries, it's usually increased amounts of sodium, increased amounts of fat, that fat coming from saturated fat specifically, and then oil. That's what you're getting. In most cases, the density of the carbohydrates are going to be less because you're getting a bun and you're getting fries, and the weight of that fries is probably much less than what it would be if you were just having the cooked potato or the cooked amount of rice. So really, you're losing carbohydrates, you're increasing sodium, and you're increasing fats, some from saturated fats, some from other fat sources. So in the grand scheme of things, what I like to do is I like to control that environment more myself, if at all possible, and give the person more saturated fat that can come strict from butter. Have them throw butter, throw ghee, whatever on their rice, on their potatoes. You're covering that. If the person needs more sodium before going to bed, whether that's to hold a look, whether that's to kind of manipulate the blood volume because you're starting to pull back on water, then give the person more sodium. It doesn't have to always come in the form of burger and fries. Now, again, the one thing that I did touch on is food density and food volume. There are times where I'll use a burger and fries, and it's specific to that. For example, great case, Brett Wilkin. I've worked with him for a long time. He's got a crazy metabolism. When we did the Chicago Pro, this was now in 2021, 22, that was actually held in Atlanta. He did extremely well. He peaked very well for that show. I think it was a situation where he got off stage at like 1:30 on Saturday and had to be back on stage at 4:30, and we lost from water and from the long prep. It was a really long, not prep, prejudging. It was a really long prejudging. He was worked very hard. We had basically 3 hours. And in that 3 hours, what I knew was most important was that Brett was rested and that we didn't overfill his stomach with food, that he was able to digest in time, and that we got some dense calories in. A time like that's when I would go to a burger and fries, or actually my preferred at that point was Chick-fil-A. So we did like a Chick-fil-A sandwich, we did a large fry, we did some chicken fingers. But that's when that caloric dense meal to me really matters. But it should never just be an automatic, or there should be a reason for it. And oftentimes, if you really think logically about it, that reason can also be done in a more controlled environment, with you selecting the saturated fats that the person might need, with the amount of sodium that person might need, and controlling it in-house versus sending that person off and just getting a burger and fries because, hey, they're 12 hours out and they need a burger and fries now.
How strict are you with your clients on counting greens or fibrous carbs?
Strict. Next. No. I don't give freebies. So if I say have 100 grams of greens, whether that be zucchini, green beans, that's what I want them having. I also don't consider fiber content negating total carbohydrates from net carbohydrates. I don't do that either. So again, guys, in a lot of ways when I coach, I'm very simple. I don't overcomplicate, and I also don't play these games. So if I think fiber is important. I don't think crazy amounts of fiber are important, but if you're on 200 grams of carbs from rice and you have 35 grams of fiber in your diet, in my logical brain, I'm still counting that as 200 grams of carbs. I'm not counting it as 165.
Do you think the Revive VitaPack is a sufficient enough dosage for a natural bodybuilder, or do you recommend higher dosages for bodybuilders versus general population?
Okay, great question. This person is asking about the Revive VitaPack. We made that Revive VitaPack with the general consumer in mind, and also for convenience. And within that, we wanted to create something that specifically had some density to it in terms of the specific ingredients that we chose. But if you are an athlete and you're in a deficit, I would encourage you, especially from a fish oil perspective, to get more than what's supplied within that vitamin pack. So again, I just want to be fully transparent with you guys. Obviously, this is a brand that I own. I'm one of the partners in the brand, but I also want to be real with you. I think from an athletic perspective, you need more omegas now, and also you need more essential fats if you're in a deficit. That being said, this is a great option if you're on the go. If you don't have time to pack each individual vitamin when you're going on a trip, grab one of these. You're great for a few days. But for daily, day in and day out consistency, especially through a contest prep or as a performance athlete in general, when you're relying on your output on a day-to-day basis, I personally would consume higher amounts of omega fats within my diet.
I'm a natural bodybuilder, and no matter what, every time I prep for a show, the first thing that shrinks is my arms. How do I improve them in the off season?
Okay, so when you know that, or you know that something is the first to go during a prep, for me specifically, that was my chest. So my chest was always something I was mindful of during my off seasons. And then when it came to prep, one of the things that's frustrating about your chest and your triceps and your shoulders is that the leverages and the contact you have when you're pressing is going to become less. As you have less body mass, your leverages are going to go down. So therefore your pressing strength is going to go down. So this is always something that I was combating as well. If you know that your arms are something that goes down for you, more than anything, what I would really encourage you to do is to work on getting as strong as you possibly can within the lower range of hypertrophy during your off season. And for me, getting as strong as possible most often for most people means that you need to control volume, keep the volume on the lower end, keep your output as high as possible, with your output being as high as possible, meaning your effort within an individual set and the load on the bar or the load on your body. For example, if you're doing dips, you need to then figure out how much load you can do, how much effort you can give, and then how long it's going to take for you to recover to then ultimately surpass that effort in a number of weeks, months, whatever it takes. And then when you go into prep, and I believe I talked about this in a previous episode, but I think one of the first things that we do is when we have a bad day during prep, we compensate for that bad day or that lack of load or missing a set by then adding more volume to either punish ourselves or convincing ourselves, well, I didn't hit the goal that I was supposed to hit, so I need to do more to make up for that. And then that is when the negative domino effect happens, where you really start to drop off on strength. And as you drop off on strength, you're gonna drop off on volume within that muscle. So if you have a bad day during prep, notice and realize that most likely that's because you are starting to have a lack of recovery. So therefore you need to recover a greater amount in order to have that same output of strength. Now, granted, at some point we are going to lose strength during a contest prep. Ideally, for most people, what I like to consider is like the cosmetic phase, which really that's the last 4 weeks. That's when you should have these drop-offs. If it's happening much before that, I would say it more or less has something to do with your plan specifically, and you're not controlling some variable, the best that you can. So keep your strength as high as possible. Keep your output within individual sets as high as possible. Mitigate your volume. So as you become more fatigued, as you go longer and longer into a deficit, realistically, guys, in order to maintain muscle, you should be backing off the volume, not driving the volume up during a prep. That's my belief. That's my belief system. That's the way that I believe that you can hold on to the most amount of tissue. So hopefully that helps. And then that tissue then correlates to size. Now, one thing I want to consider, that I want you to consider too, is that size is often correlated to muscle glycogen within a muscle. You need to know that you're momentarily going to have to get flat in order to get into true contest shape. When you go flat, you're going to appear smaller, but you need to know the difference between appearing smaller and also being smaller. And that's when being mentally tough enough to know that if you're really controlling your strength metrics and your volume metrics, at times the volume of your muscle might go down, but that's just a lack of glycogen. And then when you have these refeed days, which I talked about last episode, you're going to then see that, you haven't lost any muscle. It was just that you're depleted, your glycogen stores are lower, and therefore you look smaller, but you actually are not smaller.
What is your opinion on using the sauna during prep or on a regular basis?
So my opinion on using the sauna during prep, it depends on if you are using the sauna to try to, for lack of a better word, like control your scale weight, or if you're using it for health reasons. So that to me is the difference. Like if you are one of these people that obsess about what your morning weight's going to be and would obsess about what your morning pictures are going to look like, and potentially maybe are not communicating this to your coach and tricking your coach in a way, like if your morning routine is, okay, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to hardly drink any water, I'm going to go do my cardio, that way I drop water there. Then after I do cardio, I'm going to sit in the sauna for 15 minutes and drop some more water there. And then I'm going to look crazy because now my skin's hot and tight and I've dropped 6 pounds of water. And then I'm going to send my coach my pictures. You're skewing yourself. You're messing with the coach-client relationship, because it's not an actual image, that you want to represent, because it's not real. So if that's your reasoning for using a sauna, and if I just called you out for doing that, then no, don't do that. If you're using a sauna in the evening for health benefits, That's great. But also on the back end of using the sauna, you have to make sure that you rehydrate or continue to hydrate while you're in the sauna with electrolytes, because that's not the point, guys. The point of a sauna is health benefits outside of just water depletion, and again, if you are already depleted, you need to be very cautious of depleting yourself of water in a contest prep, especially when you're under load and your joints are involved and muscles are involved. And if you want to know the benefits of a sauna, I am not the expert. Go listen to Andrew Huberman or one of these guys that talks about it a lot more than I do. But from a true bodybuilding standpoint, just don't use the sauna as a water manipulation tool all during prep, because it's not needed for that. To make weight, that's a different story.
During a bulk, how do I know how many calories to start out with and how to structure my macros?
Okay, during a bulk, we definitely did a full episode on this, so make sure that you reference that. But really, there is, without knowing anything about you, without knowing what your current diet is like, it's very hard to answer this question. But what I would say is you need to establish a baseline for yourself, and that baseline should be somewhere around where your current daily intake is. All right. So whether you're eating on a set plan or not, whether you're eating meal 1 at Starbucks, whether you're going to Chipotle for meal 2, your mom's cooking meal 3, and you're having a YOLO diet for meal 4, you need to find some way to establish a baseline there. And then from that baseline, if you are maintaining weight, then obviously whatever that baseline looks like, even though it might be inconsistent day to day, you need to figure out what the average of that is and then add calories to that. Or if you're gaining weight too fast, then cancel out, control those inconsistencies, figure out what that baseline looks like, and then from there, reduce calories to then be gaining at a slower rate where you can actually assess your progress versus gaining so fat where you're just adding fat tissue and not really putting on any quality tissue.
Best way to get rid of gas and bloating on a bodybuilding diet?
Best way to get rid of gas and bloating on a bodybuilding diet: remove the egg whites from your diet, remove the sweet potatoes from your diet, remove the broccoli from your diet, remove the whey isolate from your diet. If you still have problems after that, and after not consuming those for, I would say, a week, then ask me this question again. No, but seriously, that is the root of issues for a lot of people. I would say is actually 5 things: egg whites, whey protein, especially things that aren't 100% pure isolate. But even if it is 100% pure isolate, which we sell a ton of back there, I'm going to again be transparent with you guys. Not everybody can consume that consistently. So whey isolate, broccoli or green sources of vegetables. Sweet potatoes, that was a massive issue that I had early on in my bodybuilding career, but I love them so much that I didn't cut them out when I should have. And then also too many artificial sweeteners. That's another thing too. So obviously, guys, pay attention to the amount of artificial sweeteners that you're consuming, even again through your supplementation. One thing that I would suggest: pump products are great. Citrulline is great, glycerol is great. If it has artificial flavoring in it, then you're already getting it from there. So maybe if you are having that, then go to an unflavored EAA, where you're not getting all these different, because if you're using a pre-workout and a pump and an EAA and a protein, and then you're having 3 energy drinks a day, eventually those things can catch up to you. So be mindful of your total consumption of artificial sweeteners. And then, like I said, rule out those first 4. That's to me is like the holy grail of bad digestion 101. So egg whites, sweet potatoes, broccoli, and spinach for some people. And then the last one is whey protein, whether it's concentrate or even isolate for some people. So be careful of those. Be cautious of those. Remove those completely from your diet and then watch and see what happens. This was episode 7. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I really had a fun time doing this, so I don't know. Eventually, we're going to run out of topics within this set format of questions to talk about. So we can, kind of venture into other things if you guys want. I'll try to keep it bodybuilding centric as long as possible until I just feel like I've exhausted myself of talking about the same thing over and over. But again, next week, episode 8, we're going to be rolling into peak week strategies, which I'm super excited to share with you guys, what I've learned in my experience and my time doing this. I myself am going to be peaking both Nick and Quentin next week for the New York Pro. That process for both of them has already started. And again, early on, I just go variable by variable. And as I just discussed, one of the first things that I do is I solidify the amount of water. I remove all artificial sweeteners, and then I just make sure that some of the vitamins that we're taking are just consistent, and they're in, and they're consistently taken at the same time every day. That's how I start out every peak week. I rely on the scale a lot. Some people might think that makes me a bad coach. I think it makes me, realize the tools that we have and just utilize every tool as best as we can. To me, one of those tools is the scale. I like to know how the body is trending from a weight perspective over the day, throughout the day, from PM to AM. To me, that's super important when it comes to manipulating water. So I'll go into all that when we talk about peak week strategies and make sure that I give you guys just a lot of valuable information, all right? Hope you guys have a good week, and we'll see you next week.